Welcome to the second part of the Figma workshop series. I remembered to hit record this time, so if you have to leave early, totally cool. I'll post the recording on our website probably later today. Uh, First off, we're going to go through a little review of those components and styles that we mentioned last week, just because I know that those can be a little confusing. And that way we can set up our mock-up and prototype today to have it be a little bit easier to create. And then we're going to go through a bunch of new stuff. We're going to add more of the colors and text and fonts and all that, making our design a lot better. If you were not here last week and you want the Figma professional account for free, you just got to go to figma.com and then go to the pricing tab. And then under professional, there's this really hidden link that says free for students and educators. If you click there and then you click this get verified button on the next page, you can create your account or sign in if you have an existing Figma account. Use your USC email. It just dynamically shows that you're affiliated with USC or any university, and it gives you that professional version for free. Last week, I mentioned that the professional version, because we have a free version of it, doesn't allow you to upload videos. That is still a thing. They did this really fun thing too, where they added a new qualification. It was actually something I was going to teach next week. So if you go to Figma, I don't know if you all remember, but I kind of show when you click this dev mode button. So it's more of you've designed it, now you're going to prep it for development. They decided that starting tomorrow, this feature is out of beta and you have to pay to get it. So I will not be showing this next week because I don't want to pay for it. I'm assuming most of you don't want to pay for it as well. Just keeping what's free. We'll still go over all of the prototyping stuff. I'll show you some additional resources that you can use next week. So it's not a complete lost cause for next week. Cool. So quick review for styles. Let's start with that. So styles, when you have your canvas selected, so anywhere in this black thing, yours might look a little bit different, but anywhere outside with no thing selected, you'll have this local styles section right here. And styles can be any of these four things. So text, color, effect, or grid. Basically, what styles do is it allows you to create almost like a little rule. So if I were to click text, I can create my new text style. I can name it whatever I want. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to name this body text. And then now I'm going to change some properties. And then this way I can apply the style to a bunch of different pieces of body text where I don't have to make sure that my settings from one to the next are the same. I just have to apply this and I know that they're all going to be the same. So the properties that I'm going to use for body text for this project we're going to go through, if you want to change the font, so where it says Inter, which is the default, if you click there, I am going to use one called Arimo. You can just start typing. It's Arimo. Leave it at regular. For the font size, where it says 12, I'm going to put 24. Generally, you're probably used to when you're writing essays or something, you're using 12-point font. That's nice because when something's printed, you can take it closer, put it further. With screens, I like to just go a little bit bigger just to be safe. And then I can click create style, and then I'll see it over here now. So this basically, I can apply this style to all of the body text that I want throughout my design. And I know that it's going to apply a Remo, it's going to be 24, and then any of the other things that I change will be there. All right, we're going to create 4 other text styles to use in our design. So press the plus button. There's 2 different ones that can show up, one by local styles where you can then click the specific one. But if you already have a text or color or grid styles inline there, there's already a plus button and you can click that to skip a step. By text styles, I click plus, and then now I'm going to create the next one. And this is going to be a page title. This one, instead of Arimo, I'm going to use Archivo Black. So Archivo Black. This one is a different kind of font. It is designed specifically for display. So you'll notice where it says regular, I can't click and change it. It's essentially like a bold text. They're like, you can't really do anything, can't make it italics, can't make it not bold. This is just what it is. And then I'm going to change it from 12 to 96. So really big and bold page title. Pretty typical of modern design. All right, we're going to create, let's just do two more. So this next one, again, I like to use really descriptive names. If you want to use a pretty non-descriptive one and add your description to provide some additional context, you can. But I'm going to put H2 here. This stands for heading 2. In web development, there's 6 different levels of headings. So 1 through 6. 1 is the biggest and the most important, and 6 is the smallest and the least important. Heading 1 is basically our page title, but I'm just using page title instead of heading 1. For web development, only have one H1 on each page. Heading 2 is the next kind of level of heading. You're going to use a lot of these. So I'm also going to change this to the archival black. And then instead of 12, I'm going to do 35. A lot of the like choices in fonts and sizes is just kind of playing around with and seeing what looks good. Yes. Archival black. Cool. Let's do one last one. This is going to be our H3. This is also going to be archival black. And this one will be 25 for its size. All right, I already have my 12 column grid, but if you don't have one, if you just started or you accidentally deleted yours, let's click create grid style, or you can click up here and click grid. And then under properties, you click right here to change it from a grid. And then you can click where it says grid right here, change it to columns. And we did 12. The type was stretch. And I believe our margin and our gutter was 20 each. Let me double check. Oh, margin was 50, gutter was 20. So as a refresher, margin is the outside of it. So the leftmost column to the leftmost part of your screen, and the rightmost column to the rightmost part of your screen. And then gutter is the space in between the columns. Cool. And we are going to do 5 different colors, and then I'm going to show you how I picked the colors that I decided to do. So if you just want to click plus by color styles or click up here and then click color. This first one is going to be named text. This is the color I'm going to use for all of my text. And then right here where it's that default color value, let's change it to 2, 5, 0, 4, 1, 1. If you want to pick your own color, feel free to do it. If you're following along with me, it's 2, 5, 0, 4, 1, 1. You'll notice it is not a pure black. I typically try to avoid using pure black or pure white in designs just because it can be a little harsh for the eyes. All right, let's create the next one. So the next one, we're going to do background. So this is going to be the background for each of our pages. And this one is going to be FEF 1F7. FEF1F7. Cool. And it's this like slightly pink-ish color. Now let's name this one primary. So this one's going to be the primary color I'm going to use across my designs. It's the one that's going to draw attention to stuff. And for this one, we're going to do E91 D77. E91 D77 to be this kind of bright neon-y pink. Yes.
So use it in another, or we need to recreate it.
You'll recreate it. All right. The next one, we'll do a secondary color. So for this one, it's going to be stuff that we use kind of sparingly. We'll use it occasionally. And this one's going to be 81F 3A4. And it's this kind of minty green. Yes, it is H1F 3A4. All right. And one last color. This is going to be accent. This is going to be colors that I want to use to just kind of draw your attention to something. It's, you know, kind of random. Just, hey, highlight this, highlight that. This one's going to be 48D 1ED. And it's this kind of bright blue with some bright kind of contrasting colors. Now, there are billions and billions of colors out there. You might be wondering, how do you decide which ones to use for a design? My favorite tool to use is realtimecolors.com. So what this site does, and it actually does have a Figma plugin, is you can see how a color scheme looks on a like kind of gibberish site. So what I normally do is down here, there's this die icon. You can also click spacebar and you can just randomize the colors. And I just kind of keep going until I'm like, ooh, that one looks fun. Let me play around with that. And that's where you can see I got all these names for them too. Text, background, primary, secondary, accent. If you like one, like let's say I really like this green primary, but I want others to change, you can lock it down. And then when you randomize, it's not going to change that one. Cool. You can also simulate light and dark mode. All right. That's styles. We're going to apply them in a bit so that you can see how they work when they're applied. Does anyone have questions about creating the style? Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is those components. And we're going to actually do some new stuff with components today too. So I am going to show you how to do this. So we're going to start off with you don't have to follow along with this if you just want to watch. I'm going to do a rectangle. I'm going to change the color, let's say to this blue. I'm going to add text on top of it that says click here, in a little bit more. All right. So I have my sample button. So components are really helpful when you want to create one asset that you want to make multiple copies of, you want to put all across your design, like let's say this button. So if I have this selected and I click this diamond icon up here, this create component, and you'll notice it changes from that white to this purple. And that's how you know that you've created your component. If you go over to your assets page, you will also see it located there. So I'm going to create 4 instances of this component. Now, instances are basically different versions. You've created the main one, and then these are going to be the offshoots, essentially. I'm going to show you 4 so we can visualize how things happen. So this first one I'm going to show you, I'm going to change nothing about it. This next one, I'm going to change color only. I am going to change text only, and I am going to change text and so. This is my main component, and these are all instances of that component. The thing that's nice about this is when you create your main component and you put it all across your design, if you want to change things, it will apply to all of the instances that don't have that setting overridden. So this one, I'm going to change nothing about it. So that should change when I ever change this text or the color. This one, I'm going to change the color individually. So this one, I'm going to go to like this pink. I'm going to change this text to say, please click here. It does not want me to move this. Okay, you get the idea. This one, I'm going to change it both to please click here, and I'm going to change to that pink. Okay, so now whenever I change the color here, which ones do you think are going to change? Yes, the first and third, because I have not changed the color in here. So when I go down here, and I play and change it, only the ones where I haven't individually changed that color will change and match this. Now, if I do text, it's going to be the ones where I haven't changed the text. So if I change this to really click here, it's only changing the ones that I haven't changed the text individually. Cool. That making maybe a little bit more sense? Great. So now let's go to our prototype page. If you haven't created one where it says your page up here, you can expand it and then you can click plus to add a new page. And we're going to start our prototype. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is actually going to be without this frame. We're going to start building our view project button that we're going to use across our design. So everyone, please click on the rectangle tool. And this time, just click anywhere in your canvas. And you can scroll in to view it better. That's going to create a perfect 100 by 100 square, but I want this to be more of a rounded rectangle. So for the width, let's put 390. So 390. And then for our height, let's put 73. You can also click and drag to create a rectangle and then change those numbers too. All right, down here where we have this little arc shooting up and to the right, this is our corner radius, or essentially how curved are our corners. Let's change that setting to 100. So we got some perfectly rounded corners. With it selected, we have our fill. Let's click on this 4-dot button, and this will bring up the styles for color that we've created before. And let's click that primary one, that really bright pink. Let's click the T button to add some text. You can click really anywhere and type view project. So as you're typing, you'll notice that my cursor is still blinking at the very end. So if I change any settings, it's not actually going to do anything because none of this text is actually selected. So click outside onto your canvas, and then where you see this now box and there's this baseline, this means that the entire piece of text is selected. So let's change where it says fill. Let's click on our 4-dot for styles and background. And then for text, we're going to do the same. We're going to click on 4-dot styles. And this one, let's do H3. All right. So now we got some text. We got our rectangle for our button. We want to make sure that they're aligned perfectly vertically center and horizontally center. So with them both selected, you can do this by just clicking and dragging right over. You can click on one layer, hold down shift, click the other. Let's use this align horizontal centers button. It's your second one under design, and then use the align vertical centers as well. It's this one that's 1, 3 from the right. So this way we know that they are perfectly centered together. Now we're going to create these as a group so that they move together. We don't have to keep selecting both individually. You can do this by doing a Command or Control G, or clicking that Figma button, and then it's under Object Group Selection. You can also right click and there will be group selection. But Command or Control G is your easiest bet. Over here it says Group 1. I want it to be a little bit more descriptive, so I'm going to double click in there. And I'm going to type in view project button. Awesome. So now we're going to go through the very first new part of today, and that's called auto layout. So right now, if I double click in here to do view project and I decide to add this text that says here, you'll notice that it's no longer centered and the button didn't really extend either. It just kind of looks bad. You have to keep redoing. So if you select the button group, because we have more than one element selected, we're going to see this auto layout. So let's add this plus. And essentially what auto layout does is it allows you to dynamically change how things look in a layout without having to manually configure it every time. So we have this set to horizontal layout. For this one, it doesn't actually really matter because we're not going to be adding additional components to this. So if we were to like make a bunch of more buttons within this frame, which I can show you real quick. You don't have to follow along if you don't want. If I were to. So right now it's seeing my view project and my new rectangle. Because I have it horizontal, it's going to add right by each other. I can do vertical. They're always going to add on top of each other. And then wrap is if you're going to have both horizontal and vertical. So it's more of like a grid situation. But we don't need that for this button. All right, we got some settings here too. So this first one is that horizontal gap between items. This will change to vertical if you have a vertical alignment. This essentially, if you're going to have more than one piece in your auto layout, this is just how much space there is between them, either horizontally or vertically. Then we have this horizontal padding and this vertical padding. We're not going to change these values because I like how this looks right now. But this is essentially the distance between our content of view project here and the borders around here. And this is a concept called the box model, which I will show you a little graph. A fun little thing that you can do on any website on the web if you're using Chrome. I think Firefox and Safari also have this, but I don't know how to do it. If you right click and click inspect, it's going to show you all the code used to build that site. And under this styles tab, there's this graph right here. And this is that diagram of the box model. So if I were to select, let's say, this latest news headline, this blue part is the actual content itself, how much that latest news text is taking up. Padding is the space between that content and its border. The border is essentially if you have a border around it. And then margin is the space between other pieces of content. So I can see that right now, this is a value of 30, and I can see that it's 30 pixels away from the thing above it. Yeah. Yeah, if you're in Chrome, you can just right click on any page and then you click inspect. So that's just a representation of those settings. You can play around with them in Figma too. With this auto layout, these are the paddings, so the space between our content and the borders. If we were to add a stroke around our rectangle, that's going to be our border. So if I added one right here and I made it, let's say outside, that's our outside border. And then margin would be if we have multiple buttons, how much there is space between them. The nice thing about auto layout is now it knows that all of the content within here should have this settings. So the horizontal gap, the padding. So now if I double click within view project and I start typing here, it expands that button for me. So I don't have to keep playing around with resizing things and making sure that everything's even. Yes.
That's like, and I just put sign, I see in the middle, and I think I may put sign in, so the last of the square that is just I am.
You don't want it to change?
You don't want that.
Yeah, that you would just not make it an auto layout. So if I were to remove this and I were to say like view project here, I would just do this and then like realign these things together. Cool. We'll play more with auto layout in a little bit. But for now, let's click on our frame. When you do auto layout, it creates it as a frame. And then let's create a component. So now you'll notice that, so far we've only done components and dragging and dropping to make a new instance. But there's also this option right here, this new diamond button where that create component used to be. When you have a component selected, this will add a variant to it. So if I click it, it adds a new version of that element there. Why do we want to do this? Well, you can actually prototype with variants, and we'll see this next week a little bit more. But before with the instances, it's not really easy to like have it where you hover over the button and it changes to show that you can click on it. And this is how you actually do that. So when I have my component selected and I created a new variant, this is what I want to change. And we're going to do it with that hover state. So if I go back to my main component within my new little section, down here, you'll see where it says current variant. And where it says property one, if you double click in there, we're going to change this to hover state. And this is just naming what our property is. And then this is going to be our value. So right now it says default, and I'm going to change this to not hovered. And this is essentially just me letting myself or any other designers who are accessing this file, this is what it's going to look like when this button is not being hovered over by a cursor. If I go to my variant, I can change where it says variant 2, and I'm going to say hovered. So here I'm going to make some changes to show kind of what I would like it to look like, that visual indicator when you hover over something. UX best practice, if something is clickable, there should be some sort of visual indication when you go over it that it is. If I were to just go over on Chrome, you'll notice if I go on a tab, it changes color. There's a circle that goes around here. Everything that is clickable has some sort of indication. And you'll want to make sure that your designs have that too. So with my variant selected, I am going to click on where it says primary. That's where my fill is. And I'm going to change it to secondary. And then down in selection colors, because I'm selecting the whole group of my rectangle and my text, it's noticing that I'm selecting two different colors. So if I click on the background part and I change this to text, it knows, hey, there was something that was assigned background color. When we change that and reassign it to text. Yes, so with my variant selected, down here, selection colors, it's telling that I'm selecting my rectangle, which is pink, or this primary, and this text, which is background, or this kind of white-ish color. So if I were to click on primary, it knows that I want to change my rectangle color. And so let's change it to secondary. And then same with background, let's change it to text, just to enhance some readability. Yes, change the what? The bounds? I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're, all right. So one last thing I want to do to my variant, and this is going to be the first time that we do anything with this effects down here. So let's do a new effect and click plus. And there are 4 options for effect, and let me These zoom controls keep getting in the way. There's 4 options. So inner shadow is if you want to add a shadow inside of the content. Drop shadow is going to be behind it. Layer blur is going to be if you want to blur the actual content in front of like a crystal clear background. And then background blur is if you want to blur the background but have your content in front of it clear. So we're going to stick with drop shadow. And then if you click on this little sun-ish icon, this is where you can do your changes right here. So the X is going to be how far, let me change the color real quickly so that you can see. So the X is going to be how far to the right it is. So displacing to the right. Let's set that at 4. Y, I like where it is at 4 as well, but this is going to be how far displaced vertically it is. You can also go negative if you want it to be up. Let's leave that at 4. Blur is going to be essentially like how much blended it is. But let's stick with 4 still. I want to make it a little apparent. Spread is only enabled when you do clip content. So if I were to do this, and this is essentially like allowing where if your frame like is smaller than the actual content, that the content doesn't show outside of your frame. So if I go back here, I can do spread, and this is just how wide it goes in all directions. So I'm going to change this back to kind of like a grayish color. It's a little hard to see over here, but we'll see it a little bit better when we put a frame up. With that selected, if you really like how you did, you can click on this 4-dot menu, click the plus, and then make it a new style. So I'm going to do button, hover, and then click create style. We're doing good. Any questions? All right, let's actually start designing something then. So I just command or control minus to zoom out. Let's click on our frame tool up here. Let's do our desktop and desktop. Let's rename this home page. I just double clicked where the name was. And then with that selected, click on the 4-dot menu and let's pick background. So I created a new frame, desktop size. I renamed it the home page. And then I changed the fill to our background style that we created at the beginning of the workshop. With it also selected, I'm going to click the 4-dot menu by layout grid and apply my 12 columns. All right. I'm going to expand my frame down a little bit so we have some more room to play with. And now let's start creating a little component from our homepage. So we're kind of prototyping a portfolio website. We want to have this image that showcases the like a preview of the project, a title, a description, and then our view project button that we created. So I'm going to show you 2 ways that you can add images. One is really fun if you don't have images of your own. The other is adding your own images. So if you want to add your own image, you can click on the Figma button. Under File, there is Place Image. And this will just open up your Finder, and you can pick an image and place it down on your document. If you don't have images that you want to play around with right now, we can use a plugin called Unsplash. So there's a couple ways you can get there. One is you can right click, and then there's plugins, and then manage plugins. You can also click on the Figma icon, and then under plugins, there's manage plugins. So plugins are essentially additional functionality that either Figma or other third-party developers create so that you can play around with Figma some more. Unsplash, so you can search that one up if you don't have it, which most of you probably don't. And then you can run it. It might take a little bit, but you get this little floating window right here. Unsplash is a really great resource if you are going to be working with designs. It is a website also if you are not in Figma. So unsplash.com. This is a site that professional photographers take pictures and then upload it and say, hey, feel free to use this. Play around with it. You don't have to worry about any sort of copyright or anything. Most of them do ask that you can do attribute the photo to them, but anything that doesn't have Unsplash Plus, you can feel free to use. If you're within Figma, you can just start searching. If you're to search for, this is like people within a classroom. So I could look up students in a classroom and I can see different options. Unsplash Plus is essentially like their subscription thing if you want some additional higher res stuff, some more higher res videos. But just find any image that you want to play around with, if it's your own, if it's on Unsplash. Cool. So I have my image. I'm going to make it the width of my columns. So I'm going to place it to the left part of my column. You'll see this orange indicator line that says that it's right aligned with that. Holding down shift, because mine is smaller, I'm going to shift and then expand it. This just makes sure that it's scaled perfectly. Otherwise, you can do it any real size. I'm just going to make it go the width of my left side column to my right side column. If you're ever annoyed with the grids, you can just click on your frame and then click on the eye icon to remove it so you can see how it looks without this red grid column. All right, I'm going to show you some stuff about gradients now. We're not going to use this in our actual design, but I just want to show it to you as something you can do if you want to. So I'm going to create a rectangle that is on top of my image. As of right now, it's just this gray rectangle. Under fill, you can click on this color square right here. And then you have your options for what you want to do. This is just a single solid color. We're going to play around with some gradients. You can also put image if you want to add an image this way. I find just file place image is a lot easier. And then video is not supported. So for gradients, you have a couple options. Linear is just going to be from one side to the next. Radial is from the inner side outwards. Angular is this kind of funky little shape where it starts kind of center and left, and then it loops around. And then you also have diamond, which is similar to radial, but it's like a diamond shaped instead of circle. So let's just do linear. And if you want to add additional points in here, so right now it's just, hey, you can add 2 different colors. If you want to add multiple, you can just click right above or on this little bar to add additional points. I'm going to delete them all. I'm going to do one in the middle, let's say. And you can click and drag to move it around, and you can see that that applies through there. If you want to change the direction, this is very similar to a just kind of like a line. So you just click on one end and move it. So if you want it to be corner to corner like that. With my leftmost box selected, I'm going to do this like kind of dark blue color. With the middle one selected, I'm going to do maybe like a green. And then I'm going to make the transparency 0. So essentially making it fully opaque or colored. And then this last one, I'm gonna do the same thing I did with green, but I'm gonna make it a red, just so you can see that. And you can click and drag to like move where this is. You can also move these kind of further out if you want there to be more green. And a fun thing you can do with these gradients is this button right here. So this is the little teardrop, and this stands for blend modes. If you know Photoshop, you're probably a blend mode expert. So these are just different ways that this one can blend with this content behind it. So I can do screen and I get this kind of like rainbow overlay almost. Soft light, if you just want it to be kind of like almost like there was like some blue, some green, some red lighting in the classroom. So some fun stuff you can do with gradients there, putting it over and doing blend modes. All right, I'm going to delete that rectangle and turn back on my columns. All right, let's make our little header that explains this project. So I'm just doing like a fake Digital Lounge portfolio website as if the Digital Lounge was a person. So I'm going to click on the T icon to add some text. Mine is going to be instructional, media, lab. I'm going to click outside of here. I have it the heading 3. I'm going to change it to heading 2 so it's a little bit bigger. I just changed the text style that was applied. And then I'm just going to click and drag it so that it's on the side of my column so that it's aligned with my image. So now we played a little bit with constraints last week too. Right up here, it's left and top. So as the frame is resized, it's going to stay in that position, right? So it's going to stay the same distance from the left side or from the top side as it was originally. But there's also some other options. One that I'm going to show you is scale right here. So for my horizontal, I am going to change it from left to scale, and I'm going to do the same for the top. So change it from top to scale. We're going to see how this looks like in a little bit after we add some more content and stuff. Essentially, what this does is as we resize our screen, this content should scale to match a little bit better how that screen should have it displayed. I'm also going to change my fill to be the text color. All right, I'm going to add some more text that describes this. So I'm click the T And the text that I'm gonna do for this is gonna be a creative media technology focused classroom. You can add whatever you want. This is just playing around with Adobe certification courses and technical training workshops. It went over the canvas, so I'm just gonna click and move it, the box, so it's like this. I'm going to spell certification right. I'm going to change the fill color to be my text color. And where it says H2, I'm going to change it to my body text. So this is what it looks like. I'm going to move this box so that it's a little bit more in line with what the size of the content is. All right. And one last thing I'm going to place for this section is I'm going to go to my assets tab, and under local components, my prototype page, I have my view project button, and I'm just going to click and drag and place it on my canvas. And then I am going to place it where I want in my design. So somewhere, let's say right around there. Back on my body text, one thing I forgot to change is I'm going to change this to scale and scale too. I select my body text and my header, and I'm going to command, oh, I don't think it's actually command F. Thought it was. Oh, it's this really weird one. So select both your header and your body text, right click and do frame selection. So you can have frames within frames. It doesn't need to just be the screen. And where it says frame one, I'm going to change this to be project text. Now with that project text frame selected, we have this vertical padding, and this is going to be the space between here. I'm going to put this to 25. So I was just selecting my new frame of project text and changing this value to 25. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of auto layout inception. So we have our view project as an auto layout. But if you select both your view project button, hold down shift and click that new frame we just selected, our project text, we can add another auto layout right here. And let's do that. So auto layout, you see it moved my view project button down a little bit so that it's more aligned center. We can change this auto layout to be a fixed width and a fixed height. This essentially just makes that frame gonna be this size no matter what. You can do hug if it should hug the contents or essentially change to what they are. But I'm just going to do fixed for both. We've already done horizontal. I showed you that. Let's change it to wrap. So essentially what this is going to do is if we add new content to this auto layout, it's going to go in a new line underneath. But also if we make it smaller, it's going to wrap it down like this. So I don't have to dynamically change that myself. All right, you can change the gap between your items, how close or far you want them to be, and it changes with the vertical too. Horizontal padding is essentially how much there are on the sides of this between the border, and vertical is the same but up and down. But I'm going to leave those at 0, those gaps to be whatever they are right now. So a note about auto layout and constraints. So I have an auto layout applied to this whole section. If I were to select just my project text frame, I double clicked in here, you'll notice I don't have the capability to do constraints anymore. And that's because constraints are dependent on the overall frame. And so because this is an element within an auto layout with other things, I can't do that anymore. But I can do the constraints for the whole auto layout as a group. So if I click out and I click back in, I have constraints here. And let's change these both to scale as well. What essentially this is all doing is developing our design to be responsive to different screen sizes. Today, people are accessing websites on their phone, on tablets, on laptops, on big iMac monitors. And so making sure your content displays good on all of those is really helpful. Figma allows some things that get you somewhat there, but it's not perfect. So if I click on homepage and I hold down Option or Alt if you're on a PC and you just click and drag to make a duplicate, I'm going to double click in here and change it to homepage mobile. I just want to show you what kind of Figma looks like when you try to change your design to be a different screen. So with responsive web design, there's this concept called breakpoints. And this is essentially when you want your content to adapt to a new layout. So the breakpoint for web is normally this 1440 that our desktop one is. For iPhones, it's normally um 375, I think, for the width. And so you'll notice it's a lot smaller. I'm gonna remove this columns layout just because you'll have to adapt that as well. And you'll notice that my content got some of the way there, not great, but right now these did move to be on top of each other. And you can click and drag your text and your image. Well, let me do this where it's like this. And this is just kind of playing around with and taking the stuff the rest of the way there. Some of the selection points might be a little weird, but so now I'm designing for mobile. I just want to change some things to maybe better fit what it is. You don't have to follow along with this, but this way you can do a little bit that gets you somewhat there, but then you do have to make some manual adjustments to get the rest of the way there. Right, sound good? So the stuff that we did before, where was the constraints, the auto layout helped a little bit to get us there, but you will have to make some manual stuff when you're designing for multiple screens. Cool. I'm just going to delete that. All right. The next thing I want to show is how you can create some of your own icons in Figma. A big part of UI UX design is what the icons look like. I'll show you a way that you can create your own custom ones, and then also a plugin that I recommend if you just want to quickly grab some from someone else. So let's say I want to create a search icon, which is normally that magnifying glass when you see on websites. So click on this down arrow by your rectangle, and then we have this ellipse. So let's click that, and holding down Shift, let's click and drag to make a perfect circle. And it could be whatever size you want it to be. I release my click before I release Shift, otherwise it will just kind of go to where you're at. Now I have my perfect circle. Holding down Option or Alt, let's click and drag on our circle to duplicate it and create a new one. And then let's change the fill color because we are going to put them on top of each other. So I'm going to change this one to like a red. Clicking on your second icon or your second circle, holding down Shift, just make it slightly smaller, and then have ellipse 2. Hold down Shift and click ellipse 1, and then you can click on your align horizontal and vertical centers buttons, which is this one right here and this one right here. So this way I have this bigger gray circle that is behind this slightly smaller red circle. Keeping those selected, we have these options right here, these two squares on top of each other. If you click on the down arrow, you'll see that there are 4 different options. These are what are called Boolean operators. They're essentially how you can take 2 different or 3 different shapes and then combine them in certain ways to create new versions of them. So if I did union selection, it's going to take my background circle because it's the bigger one. Keep that. It's going to take the color from my red one because it's on top over here in the layers panel, and it's going to keep that. I'm going to Command Z. You can also Control Z to do the next one. Clicking on the down arrow again. This is the one that we are going to use. It's subtract selection. This essentially takes what you had underneath, so our gray big circle, and it's going to subtract the part where the red circle is on top. And you may have noticed over here in the layers panel, it says subtract or it said union in the previous one, but you can still go in and select each individual element if you expand that. I undid. I'm going to go back and show you intersect. This essentially just keeps the one that's on top. It seems a little silly when we're just doing circles, but if you're going to do something a little bit more advanced, it might be useful. I commanded Z, and excluding the selection does this really fun one where it does the subtract selection where it takes out the middle, but it takes that property from the red one and it applies it to what's left. Okay, so if you didn't keep subtract selection, Command Z, Control Z, get back and do subtract selection. So now I got this beautiful little ring for my search icon. So now I'm going to create the handle part of it. There's a couple ways that you can do this. I'm going to do this with a line. So if you click on this drop down arrow and there's line, just click anywhere and click and drag to make what you want. What's going to be important over here is our stroke. So I'm going to click on this black square where the color is, and then click on my eyedropper tool. And then I'm going to hover over where this gray is. And I'm just going to click and it's going to apply that color to my center is fine. This is essentially, if you're going to have a shape, this determines whether the stroke is being added inside of your shape, like your rectangle, outside, or half and half, if you're going to do center. And then where it says 1, just kind of crank it up. I'm going to do it to 10. So I just clicked on the icon and I dragged it to 10. Otherwise, you can type in 10. Then we have these two options right here. And these determine what the sides look like. So start point is where I started drawing from. So that's up here. And end point is where I ended up, which is right here. So I am going to keep this none here for my start point. And then over here for my end point, you can hover over and kind of see what those look like if you wanted to create things like this. But I'm going to do round. And if I Command Z in, you can see that it's now a rounded side, where over here it's still my straight edge for my line. All right. Command minus to get out. And then I'm just going to find where I want to put it. I'm noticing it's a lot skinnier than my other one. So I'm going to make it a little bit wider. 15 looks pretty good. And then if you hover over where the endpoint is, you'll get this icon that's 2 arrows on either side that's curved. And if you click when that's showing, you can like change the rotation if you want it to be rotated differently, or you can also use this value up here. So now holding down Shift, I'm going to click where it says subtract in my layers panel, Command Control G to make group 1. I'm going to double click in here and say search icon. So that's a little bit about using some of the shape tools and those union selection, subtract selection to create an icon. Now, something you may have noticed already is if you were to create like a rectangle, let's say, if you change sides, they're pretty even. If you do here, it's like pretty, it goes with this, but let's say you want to change it kind of like in a more unique way. So with my rectangle selected, if I double click, it took me 2 times for some reason, but I just double clicked until I got these diagonal lines going through my rectangle. This essentially allows me to make some more custom edits. So if I clicked on my corner and I change it, it's gonna just change that corner instead of resizing. So you can make some custom shapes. If I release, I can also use the pen tool over here if I wanted to. Let me try that again. The pen tool, if you go on any of the, oh, it's not working as great today. Okay. If you go on any of the sides with your pen tool, you'll notice that it's this pen icon with a plus button. So that essentially adds a new point. So if you click there and then you click done and you double click in there again, you'll notice this new points there, and that's how you can make some more custom edits. So you're not confined to just the points that are originally given. So with it selected, I had the pen tool. I went anywhere on these sides where I have this pen with a plus icon. I click done to get out of the pen tool. Then I double click back in, and then I can use that point to make a more custom shape. There's also the bend tool where if you have that selected instead of select and you click on something and you start clicking and dragging, it does this really kind of fun thing that you can like use a curved line instead. All right, cool. Any questions? Yes.
Not a question.
Sure. Yeah. I can take a look. All right. So let's do rectangle stuff again. So let's just draw a rectangle of any size. Now we're confined to what they allow us to do here, but you can go in and edit further. So if you double click in your rectangle, you should see these diagonal lines. And this allows you to edit this rectangle further with your selection tool. If you click on one of these corners and you drag it, it should move just that corner. If you're like, hey, I want more than just these 4 points, like let's say I want something like right here to be moved in, you can change the pen tool and anywhere, let me click done first. So I click done, gonna go back in by double clicking, click my pen tool, and then I find where I want to put this button, this new thing. So it'll be the pen tool with the plus icon, and that's how you can add a new point in there. You'll click done, you'll double click back in, and then you can use that point to move it again. Now, so far they've been all straight edges because this is the rectangle that we started with. But if you click on the bend tool up here, and you use one of these, you can play around with how it's curved. I find with these, it takes a little used to getting it to how you want it to look. Yeah, all right. So now the plugin that makes all of this a lot easier if you're just kind of mocking things up on your own. So again, to access plugins, if you do Figma icon, plugins, manage plugins, or you can right click, plugins, manage plugins. There's one called Iconify. So Iconify. I'm just going to click run. Similar to the other one, it gives me this pop-up. And in here, this is just a bunch of icons that you can use in your design. This one's about like gaming. There's ones for flags. If I want to search, let's see what they have for search icons. So if I click search, I get a bunch of different options. The nice thing about these is if you find one that you like and you just click and drag it in, this one's really small. I'm going to click on this lock button over here. This essentially locks in that ratio of width and height so that if I change the width, the height also changes to be the same size so that the aspect ratio doesn't change. The nice thing about these, you can double click in, you can change the fill. If I wanted this to be my primary color, can double click some more and change the individual points. So fully editable, but it gives you something that maybe looks nicer as you're getting used to creating your own stuff. All right. So I got one last thing I want to show you, and then we can do like kind of open questions. You can work on stuff and have me here to support, or you can head out. What it is all about fonts. So if we were to just type some text here, and I were to unlink my H3, you'll notice that I have all of these fonts available to me. So there is ways that you can add custom fonts if you have specific ones that you like to use that aren't in here that you want to add to your designs. Figma is based on Google Fonts. So if you just search Google Fonts, it's fonts.google.com. All of these fonts that you see in here are in Figma. So I sometimes like to, when I'm deciding fonts, go in here, type some preview, like let's say I wanted to say Digital Lounge. And then I just play around with some filters to try to see, hey, I like this one. And then I like jot down the name and then I use it in Figma. All of these are available in Figma already. But if there's one that's not in Google Fonts that you want to use, there is a way that you can add those. I took this straight from Figma itself. So the first thing is you want to download your font. You should have the file. You can find it, usually fonts online. Now you can install it to your computer. If it's Mac, it's as simple as opening up the file. There'll be a button that says install, and then it's added to your computer's files. I don't know how to do it on Windows, if I'm honest. If you have the desktop version of Figma, that means that your font is already available to use. All you have to do is install it on your computer, and you will have all of the Google fonts plus any of the fonts that you have installed on your computer. If you want to use it in the Figma web browser, like we have been working in today and last week, then all you got to do is install the Figma font helper and then add the font to that. You can find that by just looking up Figma font helper or Figma add font to browser. And there'll just be an application that you install. You add the font to there and it adds it to your web Figma.